Hey everyone, welcome to this week's podcast. It has been a one heck of a week. Oh my goodness.
It's the trend of 2025, right? Every week, since New Year's, we've had just some wild stuff happening.
Can I cancel my subscription to 2025? Can I get a refund?
I wish, man.
This
I'd like
30
a
day trial.
refund too.
I'm still within my 30-day trial. I can still return it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Technically, you are right. We haven't hit the end of the month yet, and I'm actually almost just like cringing at what's going to happen next week because it seems like every week since we started is just like, no, it can't. This is it, right? We
Yeah,
can't.
what could possibly go
Could
wrong?
possibly
And
go
everything
wrong,
just
right?
went wrong.
Yeah, famous last words, right?
Maybe we should just stop saying that. It seemed to have gotten
Yeah,
worse.
we should probably just remove that from our vocabulary. Maybe we should say what's gonna go boom next, right?
Oh gosh.
We should
Yeah.
we should play like bingo, like okay, earthquake, tsunami.
My money's on a nuke.
I mean, they did find nuclear material, right, in New York. So I mean, yeah, it's possible. It's very possible.
Anyway, welcome everyone to the podcast. Everyone, I'm Josh. I am a partner at NetForce,
And I'm Al. I'm over at Metro One.
and so each week we talk about security risks, business, and everything else that's happening that cross and intersects and converges in our life. And wow, it's been a doozy of a week. 2 weeks if you count the fact that we normally record on a Monday. Today is Friday,
Yeah.
and that should kind of indicate how crazy of the week is. Um, Al, if I'm mistaken, you got stuck in a snowstorm and something that kind of snowballed your travel back.
Yeah. Reflecting back on 2024 and our flight issues, right? So I got caught up. I was in the Bay Area over the weekend. And there's a deep freeze in the southeast, right? As I think some of our listeners probably are well aware of and probably experienced snow for the first time in New Orleans in I don't know how long. Snow in Houston, Texas. Um, Snow in Florida, which we don't typically hear about the flurries in Florida, and not known for flurries. Hurricanes maybe, but not snow flurries. So all that weather combined, in addition to some of the I guess the residual effects of a freeze like that is you get high winds. Um, I got caught. I got delayed in the airport on our normal recording time on Monday, and so I was stuck in SFO. Unable to record. Trying to get to Las Vegas for a conference, and I ended up getting delayed even longer, which should have been maybe a 2 hour delay turned into almost overnight in SFO airport.
At
So
that time, you could probably driven to
I probably
Vegas.
I probably could have driven to Vegas and been there faster, to be honest. Um, and there have been many times when I've thought that when I've been delayed in an airport, I'm like, should I just rent a car and drive? But I was an optimist, right? And but I did. I got to Vegas. I got to Vegas. Got there, was able to do the conference. It was great. But while I was in Vegas, and I live in San Diego, multiple fires broke out while I was away from my home. So you can imagine my stress level was a little elevated. I'll put it nicely. As I'm looking on the map and the fire app, uh, and watching fires sprout out within a few miles of my home. And by the way, my elderly parents live not too far from me, and they're texting me frantically like, "What do we do? What do we do?" And I'm like, "Leave immediately." You're in your 70s. Get out of there. Drive to Mexico. Find a resort. Do something. Do anything but stay there, right?
Yeah. Actually, speaking of all the snow, did you see some of those pictures on social media? I was looking at pictures at Walt Disney World,
Yeah.
literally like I think it was like I don't know how many inches of snow, but it was insane.
Right.
I saw someone put a ruler into the ground, and it was like 13 or 14 inches of snow in the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And
It's unheard of.
yeah,
It's
and I have a
unheard of.
friend who's in the military who's is based out of Pensacola, and then on his social media, I see him doing donuts in his Jeep in the
Saw
snow.
that. I saw that one. Yeah.
I was just like, oh, what the heck?
I mean, part of me, like the kid in me, I grew up in Texas, and the inner kid in me is, it does in Austin where I grew up, you usually get like one snow day a year, and it's a quarter inch at most. It's not very much, right? Um, but I do remember like the inner kid in me was excited for the children on the Gulf Coast who like just haven't experienced snow ever, and now they go outside and build a snowman or you know just get a sled out. You like the you just get some cardboard boxes and you can sled, right? And it's just fun, right? It's just a fun time. You don't have to go to school because you get the snow day. So you and your friends gonna go outside and experience snow. And the great thing about it down south is like it snows for a little bit, like it snows for like 1 or 2 days and then it melts, right? So it's not like being in Michigan or the Northeast or the Midwest where it snows and then it keeps snowing and then it keeps snowing and then like you're out there shoveling snow out of the driveway, helping your mom or dad shovel the snow out, and then dealing with all that or having to go up on the roof and knocking snow off so the roof doesn't collapse because of the added weight. So
Oh, I saw something like that. It was a on social media, there was someone who had it looked like a good 6 inches of snow on the the pools in Florida. Um I guess they're covered in a way with like mesh or something like that.
yeah, you just do a pool cover to stop the leaves from getting
Yeah.
in the
But
colder months.
well,
Yeah,
it's like a physical structure essentially.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And everything like
yeah.
that. But I was just seeing them like using this broom to gently tap it down
Yeah,
in the snow. I was just like, oh my goodness.
winter problems that Southerners are not equipped to deal with.
Well, I mean, I think that day when the snowstorm blew through, all of Houston basically froze and
Yep.
shut down, including the
Yep.
airports. It just
Yeah.
froze and shut down. So that is literally unheard of in Houston, as I'm
Well,
aware.
it was funny. I mean, I had friends on social media posting, memes about snowmen and in Houston, which like never happens. White Christmas in Houston. I mean, we're past Christmas, but it's like snow came a little late, but it still came, right? I mean, it's just funny stuff. So like I said, the inner kid me is happy for those children who got to experience a little bit of snow and have fun and get a day off of school. Um, the
Do you have a favorite inner kid story from your time?
Yeah, we had a snowball fight. I think it was like late 80s. Like it was just weird. Like it just snowed, but it wasn't like a hard pack. It was just a soft pack. It was enough to make snowballs. And me and my two brothers and like the other neighborhood kids were just like, hey, we can have a snowball fight, right? A bunch of boys. What there's snow, let's throw it. Like you see something new, like the first thing you want to do is throw it, right? So we had a snowball fight and it was so funny. I mean, because we never really dealt with snow before. So I think we all had like blue hands by the end of it because our hands are frozen. You get hit with a snowball for the first time, you get that like cold sting. You're like, oh, this is not like the movies. This hurts. Like I mean, it's just funny about how much snow. And then I remember there was a little bit of there, like so in Austin where I grew up, like the road would freeze, right? So you get the moisture and the snow would kind of like the warm asphalt would melt the snow that hits the asphalt, and then it would turn to like ice, right? So
Black ice.
yeah, you get this layer of ice all down the road. I remember one time we tried to ride a bike on it, and it was the dumbest thing that you could possibly do, and it was just the funniest thing where like five of us are trying to ride a bike, and none of us are going maybe like 3 or 4 feet before slipping, and this is before everyone wore bike helmets, so we just bust our head on like ice and just get up and like, oh, that was funny, and then try again, like, oh, you couldn't do it, let me try, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, just silly stuff like that, which I think it's just funny memories. Now that I look back and I'm like, that was probably the dumbest thing we probably could have done, but it was fun at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about this week
Okay.
in cyber. Let's see what's been going
Yeah,
on.
we've been putting that one
Needless to
off for a
say,
while.
a lot has happened. Let's talk in the news. I think the big one I want to bring up to this week is the PowerSchool incident. 62 million students impacted, having their identities stolen.
Yep.
And not just students, but also possibly even faculty and staff having the information stolen. And wow, talk about, incident. And uh, you know, uh, allegedly, I'm gonna say allegedly because I have no proof one way or the other. So I'm gonna say allegedly, that they were paid off. The bad guys were paid off by PowerSchool, to delete the data, not to keep copies. The inner cynic in me said, "Yeah, no, they probably deleted the copy, but they still have the original stored
Yeah.
somewhere." And so there's now seems to be some rumors flying around that individuals are now who are victims of the attack are now getting targeted on some way or shape or form. I didn't see all the details before we did the recording, but it looks like there's some evidence of that. And I just saw on the news cycle, they're now getting sued too for
Yeah.
improper cyber hygiene. And that's just amazing to think about, this is happening. And I think the more scary part too is um that this is the kids we're talking about too.
Right.
Kids is now their data and everything are just leaking out. At least you'll think they'd be protected reasonably for a little while, and yet here they are. They're now been front and center. Their lives and everything are exposed for the rest of their lives at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind boggling, right? Um, and even like, I think what I think what blows my mind a little bit about this thing is that it's kind of like the fires in Southern California, right? It's a known like we know people are going to try to hack your data, especially PII, right? Like we understand this is a target. This is not it's not as if we didn't know people, groups, state sponsored actors, other organizations. We understand what they're going to target. We've been playing this game for a while now.
Right.
So it's like guys, come on. You should have known better.
Well, you know, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's just scratching my head. Like, what, guys? Like this, I get it. You had the proper security and you had controls, and then they found a way around it that we didn't know about, a 0-day defect that was unaware. Okay, I get that, right? But this one just seems like they they just weren't doing proper data hygiene, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think if I remember the initial incident report, it was that a technician's account or someone with privileged access
Yeah,
was compromised, and if your account or anything was left on support mode or something like that, you could access all the data essentially at that point. It didn't turn off or anything like that. And I'm just thinking like, wow, you don't have multi-factor authentication for these accounts. And
right.
then you don't set these things to turn off, after 24 hours or whatever set time frame, but you can indefinitely leave it on. Ooh, that is very interesting.
Bad. Pretty
Yeah.
bad.
So yeah, you're just setting yourself up for failure at that point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But again, how many times have we heard this story, right? Like
Too many.
it,
Way too many.
it's like, come on, guys. Like, did you like what were you thinking, guys? Come on, you know, like, this is a little silly. So yeah, I mean, hopefully, hopefully they rectify the situation, and hopefully people learn from this, as I always say. Um,
Inner cynic of me. No. People don't learn.
yeah,
But it's why we're doing the podcast in the first place.
yeah. Hopefully we can bring some awareness to our friends who can bridge the issue. Um, We also had officially a new administration take over. Good,
Yes.
bad, or indifferent. We have a new administration. We have a new president.
Or
No,
is it an old president?
yeah, old president, new term. I think that's probably the proper way to put it. Um, what we, there was a lot of predictions about another assassination attempt during the inauguration. There was a lot of like, there's going to be riots, this and that, and really nothing, no issues. A couple protests, which I think is pretty common. Um,
The fact it was like what, -14 or something like that
yeah,
that day,
I
whatever the temperature was. I don't remember, it was just snowing, and it was so cold that it's like, yeah, for the safety,
That's
you
a
have to go
very,
indoors.
very good point. No, I don't care who you are. No assassin wants to stand out there in minus 14-degree weather. Um, no sentry, no guard, no executive protection agent wants to stand out there in minus 14-degree weather. So, that probably had a lot to do with it. No protester either, for that matter. I don't want to stand out there, in minus 14-degree weather. So I'm glad they moved everybody inside. The safety professional in me is like, yeah, that was a smart idea,
Yeah.
because that would have been pretty bad.
But
Um,
I think that was just a mere. I'm gonna fall into the category of sheer dumb luck. It was. It just made it for easier to control. Made it easier for the ingress and egress.
yeah,
I mean, just by the fact of also the limited space in the Capitol Rotunda, you
yeah,
essentially you shave everything down to the absolute, irreducible minimum
yeah,
of
you
who
do.
really needs to be there, who not to be there. So you're now vetting it down to maybe members of Congress, maybe an aide or two for them as most, members of the press, delegates, guests, VIPs, and it's a very controlled list at that
Yeah.
point, just by virtue of just how many people you can fit.
And minimal exposure to the public, minimal.
Oh,
So
and let's not forget, there's also four walls, so it's not like you
right.
can see what's going on. So it's not like you have a sniper across the street going bang.
Correct. And
So
and they were in the rotunda portion, so they would have had security up high, they would have had security low, and they had a lot of standoff between the entry points
yeah.
and exit points. So very easy to defend a group of people in that environment with the right measures and protocols. So definitely probably led to the fact that we didn't have any incidents.
Well,
or
I would say more so the cold probably kept them out
I
anyway.
think I think that I think the cold was probably the biggest factor. I totally agree with that. And for those of you guys listening who've never been in extreme temperature swings like that, outside exposed to the elements, it's 10 out of 10. Do not recommend, by me. Not fun. Not fun at all. And at some point, especially the wind, like when the wind kicks up on those cold days, it's like you can feel it in your bones. It's rough. It is not a fun experience. I don't recommend you try to experience that. It's really something you could probably do without.
I'll
And
take my I'll take my 70-degree weather, please.
yes, 100%. 100%. So yeah, definitely interesting. But as part of that transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, there's been quite a few executive orders signed, and a few things have happened, which I think, wanted to get your take on it, because I'm not the expert on it, but um, concerning from the cybersecurity perspective, and what are some of the impacts here, of some of these decisions, if you don't mind letting us all know.
So anyone, oh God, there's so many. So anyone particular comes to mind?
The CSRB, is that what it is? That
Oh, the
was
cybersecurity review board. Oh gosh.
yeah. Let's start
Um,
with that one, and why don't you give everyone a quick overview? So,
yeah, so
I wasn't aware what it was until you mentioned it, and I looked in, and I was like, oh wow, that doesn't sound like a good idea. So
so if those people don't realize, inside DHS CISA, there was a cybersecurity review board made of kind of a like a who's who elite group of cybersecurity professionals from both the public and private sector, there to review root causes of major cybersecurity incidents, like catastrophic events. So it has to reach like a certain, criticality before they would take it on, like Log4j, for example, which they did write a report on. And so, if you weren't familiar with what happened, and it was announced at the tail end of 2024, we had the Salt Typhoon incident where telephone carriers such as AT&T and T and Verizon got compromised, and God knows what was stolen in there. And this was compromise was done at a nation state level, so they were investigating it. And so it came out this week that the administration decided to axe and kill the entire group. And my first reaction was, what? And my next reaction was, huh? And then my third reaction was, oh my gosh, politics trumps national security.
No pun intended.
Yeah, well, or pun intended in this
Or
case.
pun intended.
Yeah.
However you want to read it.
Uh, and, you know, my problem with this here is that you don't pause an investigation, especially one that involves national security. You need to keep going. We looked inside I think one of the big findings for September 11th, 2001 was because of the delay in appointing Bush, certifying Bush to be president. There was a delay in actually handling the transition, and that delay in handling the transition ultimately impacted his ability to do national security and national intelligence, which led to some of the failures in
Right.
9/11. And I'm just thinking, it's a known fact, in as part of this report that was issued, as part of 9/11. And yet here we have a case where it's an incident response. You've been breached, you've been compromised, it's impacting national security, and you want to take a pause. It's like saying, "Hey, we're in the middle of a firefighting exercise. Oh, by the way, hey, it's a new mayor in town. All right, everyone, firefighters, you're fired. Just walk away from the job. We'll let the fire, burn at the same time, and we'll get the new firefighter and the new police chief, and then they'll start taking care of it." No, sorry, that does not fly in my boat. And on top of that, you don't fire everybody. You would keep at least a couple people, even if they're the minority. But you need people for continuity of operations, resilience. You need people able to at least help carry everything forward. You just don't arbitrarily cut every advisory board group within an agency like that just arbitrarily, because you need to be able to hand that baton. You need to be able to handle things in a smooth, orderly transition. It's why we have, what, 2 months ish to go from elections to when a new president actually comes into power. That transition is necessary to facilitate a smooth handover. Otherwise, if you don't have that smooth handover, you drop things, and then things fall in the cracks, and then those cracks become very, very big gaps, which ultimately leads to something happening. So I'm not happy about that. And for those of you who didn't see who some of the members are, some of the members include, oh god, Dimitri from CrowdStrike, the former chief technology officer. So it's not like it's nobody. It's actually quite a few well-known individuals.
Yeah, and we'll post a link to the Wikipedia link on so you can just get an overview of what that organization was doing and who the members were. And I agree with you, Josh. I mean, there were some heavy hitters, a lot of deep knowledge on that board. And like I was telling you earlier, I don't I hate to see politics get involved in national security decisions like this, which we'll call a spade a spade. This looks like it was a political decision um, tied to some of the decisions the previous administration was doing that the current administration was not in alignment with. But I, I think what the taxpayers are looking for here is for the government to solve the problem, right? Like the politics should come second, solving the problem should come first, right? And in this case, I don't think we're doing. I don't think we're solving the problem here, right? Like the problem at hand here is we need to have this public-private partnership when it comes to cybersecurity. Being a guy who I served at Cyber Command, for 2 years as a targeting officer. I understand the capabilities of that organization, understand the capabilities of some of the three-letter agencies that are adjacent to that organization. Um, we just don't have enough tool sets and budget on the government side to provide a stalwart and robust defense against the cyber threat that we're facing right now. And we need to have that engagement from the public sector, or excuse me, the private sector, to get better at it. And quite frankly, private sector works the problem daily. They deal with the problem daily, and they have a lot. They have just an ability to pivot faster to the threat, and primarily due to the fact that you know there's a lot of development tools in there that is tied to businesses, right? To combat this stuff. So, and my personal opinion is we. It seems like when we do things like this, it seems like we're pitting we're pitting the private sector and the public sector against each other, which is not. Again, I don't believe that's what the taxpayers are asking for. The taxpayers are asking to solve the problem, and the entity or organization that's best positioned to solve the problem or advise on the problem to make policy should be involved in the process, right? So, I'm gonna say that I'm I'm not. I don't think this decision was a well thought out decision, given the ongoing investigations into a lot of the state sponsored hacking. And so, you know, again, I'm hoping for the best, right? I'm hoping we move forward here from this, and we're able to do what we need to do collectively as a society, as a country, as both public and private entities. But to your point, I just you got an ongoing investigation. You've got information that's going to come out of that investigation that's going to be beneficial for both the public sector and private sector. It's information that we all need to be read into so we understand how to solve the problem, stop the threat.
Yeah, I
Like
agree. I agree with you. Everything you said right there. It just does not make sense. You
it
need a
doesn't make sense.
healthy public-private partnership. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Otherwise, everything does go wrong.
Yeah. And when those walls go up, I think that's when you start seeing the problems happen, right? And we kind of had we saw this in the early 2000s, right? There was just the government was doing its own thing, really, and the private sector was doing its own thing. Um, and then the social media thing happened. And, like we guys working on government stuff started using private sector tools, free tooling, and all of a sudden we have compromises, right, across the board, and vice versa, right? So the left hand feeds the right hand. We have to the, like we talk about convergence, right? There's also convergence of public and private right now too. Of these worlds have collided, and they're not going to uncollide anytime soon. So if ever, for that matter, and we need to be conscious of that. Is that everyone is working collectively to safeguard our information, our data, our online presences, our ability to do business online, our ability to enjoy ourselves online safely, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, going off the media sources. Sorry, I have to take a few deep breaths before I go off on a rant. Um, I'm trying to avoid that. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid shaking my fist at the screen like my
We'll just,
dad does.
we'll just say you're just having a quibble.
That's right. That's right. A whoop-saw moment. Um, if we believe or if we speculate based on the media reporting, this was a budgetary decision. Um, and that entire office, so not the program itself, not the CSRB, but the entire office, um, their annual budget allocation was $3 billion. Now, again, I'm not in the administration. I'm not in Congress looking at budgets. I'm not an OMB. I don't know what the total U.S. budget allocation for 2025 is, and this and that. But it seems to me the risk versus reward on that is not there. Saving saving $3 billion in the overall U.S. budget. And I'm not advocating that we don't save money. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I don't know if taking that money away and eliminating that office really made us safer in any way for the amount of money we saved not having it. How much more are private companies going to have to pay out, or public institutions going to have to pay out in potential cybercrime and cyber incidences, right?
Yeah, I think it two old phrases come to mind. First phrase coming, is penny wise, dollar foolish. It is classic here. I mean, you're spending money here, assuming even 3 billion. I think 3 billion is what the entire DHS CISA's budget or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like multiple offices in that department. This is one of them, right? And that entire agency's budget was $3 billion with, like, I think 5 or 6 different offices within it.
Yeah,
So
so it's pennies on a dollar technically, because
absolutely.
and on top of it, this is also an advisory board. So most of the time, at least my experience in government is advisory boards are usually volunteer.
Right.
So that means, the members of the board aren't really getting paid. So you're cutting a board potentially that's making almost probably costing you almost nothing. If it is costing, it's probably costing cycles, which you're already having to do and expend anyway by virtue of staff,
Right.
anyways. So you're really giving them more work to do, but it's their job to do it anyway. They have to investigate these things. So you're just helping them to do their job. So your so-called money saving of 3 billion might not even be technically 3 billion. It might be even far less than that. It might be what, $3,000 in savings per advisory board
Well,
group.
I mean, so the CSRB, the Cyber Safety Review Board, right? It
Yeah.
falls under Homeland Security's
Just,
Cyber and Infrastructure, or excuse me, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, right? And
yeah.
so CISA, which is the overall office under Homeland Security, their funding is 3 billion, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're talking about an all volunteer board of, I think, roughly like 10 to 11 members on the CSRB, all coming from education institutions, um, government institutions, and private sector, right?
Yep.
So we're just going to assume 10 people unpaid, right, on the board itself, plus maybe 100 staffers, which gives you 10 staffers per board member, right? Roughly. Um, not very, by government standards, not very expensive
Yeah,
to
that's what, let's say they
maintain.
make but $80,000. That's pretty generous, by the way, for a government
Yeah,
salary.
I mean,
So 80,000
80,
times by,
80, 80 to
sorry.
100, even at 100,000 a year, like, we're still not, we're talking 100 people, 100,000 a year. We're not talking about a lot of money in terms of the federal budget, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus
So
what kind of, like, and when we talked about, I think we talked about this last year a little bit about cybersecurity incidences and their cost, right?
oh yeah.
What's the cost of a hack, right? And then and we can't even really give you an accurate number, because there's other things that go in that go into that of hacks. Some hacks not even being reported, and they just paying the ransom up front, and other factors as well. But when we consider, like, most hacks, it's multi-million-dollar ransoms or multi-million-dollar brand damage. This seems like it common sense. Like, we should have a review board that does this, that is assisting in that public-private partnership, allowing the discussion and discourse to happen, doing these investigations to identify trends that are occurring, identify patterns, or identify weak points and vectors that adversaries are using. Um, so yeah, I don't agree with this decision at all. For whatever, for budgetary constraints, or whatever the official reason is. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah. Unless to the other idiom I was thinking of was, not penny wise, dollar foolish, but cutting off your nose to spite one's face.
Yeah.
It really felt like that. And I get if you want to put your own political point Ds and individuals and everything like that and everything. I get that, but still, you would add to the committee, you would add additional spots, not simply just take it away kind of deal.
Well,
Or
yeah, I think there's multiple ways to solve a problem, right? We don't have to go with option one, which in this case I will call it the nuclear option. There's just nuke the whole thing and let's move on to the next one. I think there was several things that could have been done here. You could have asked for board members' resignations and asked other people to come onto the board. Um, to your point of retaining people closest to the investigation so that continuity could occur, or set a later transition date on this. Once you complete the investigation, we're going to rotate you out of the
yeah,
board. So I think there were several things that could have happened here differently. To your point as well. I mean, I understand the political game here that there was a lot of rhetoric about we've got to make big changes and we got to make them quick. So maybe this is just one of those things that got caught up in the mix. Um, it it just seems odd that we would eliminate an office like this, given the history of of hacking against U.S. companies and PII of U.S. citizens. And to your point earlier that we talked about offline about when a hack happens, they're not, 90% of the time, they're not targeting, oh, well, you voted for Trump, you know, I'm going to hack you, or you voted for Biden, I'm going to hack you. They're going after everything. They're going to go after everything. And they're going to use all that data to figure out ways to exploit anybody and everybody to suit their means, whatever that means, whatever that end game agenda is for that organization. So it's not
and
something that like it's similar to the fire. Like the fire doesn't pick who voted for who when it comes to the neighborhood. It's taking everything out with it.
yeah, and I think you might anyone who's listening to this podcast might be thinking, why should I care? Well, if you understand how the U.S. cell phones work, there's only really three major, maybe four major providers of cell phone services, and that includes anyone who's buying all the prepaid or the virtual network providers like Google Fi, Cricket, or anything like that. And the carriers are essentially Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and maybe you want to consider US Cellular as a
Yeah,
provider. But in general, it's those three, four people who control 99.999% of all cell phone services in the nation here, like 99.999%. So that means by virtue of compromising AT&T and Verizon, that's 50% of the records right there
right.
just swooped and up and gone. And so that means everyone who has a Verizon or AT&T phone, whether you use it for personal purposes or use it for work purposes, or you have a corporate account, you know, all swept up. And think about it. Anyone whose organization has a corporate account with Verizon or AT&T, you are swept up in this too as well. And who knows what was taken, how deep they embedded in the systems. We just don't have a good understanding right now of the impact on this. And so, like, my concern would be if you think about all the data that is collected, your phone is literally as you travel along routes is generating a path or a route
Yeah,
of directions. Text message data. Think about all the telemetry that your phone is potentially sending associated with your call.
and
Thinking about also the
who you're
text
talking to.
records, who you're
Yeah,
calling back and forth, exactly. All this subscriber information, payment card information. If you have like T-Mobile gives you discounts if you quote unquote put your credit card on file, or your bank information right there. I don't know, what to the extent is the compromise to each of these groups, but I do understand potentially what information that they are holding or they are having transit or in motion at any given point in time. And that just makes me pause and go, we need to take care of this. We need to really understand this. And like for those of you who don't know, here in the state of California, I think we do something like an absurd number like 44, 45, 47 million like 911 calls
yeah,
today here in the
quite
state
a
of
bit,
California.
quite a bit.
Um, but if you look, the vast majority of the calls, 80 to 90% of that calls are going over cell phones.
Yeah.
which means VoIP lines are going the way of dodo birds. Landlines are definitely the way of the dinosaur. Just think about all these calls that are just disappearing and they're all ending up on the cell phone. My mother's a great example of that. She is literally glued to her cell phone. It's not like she leaves her cell phone, even though she has a perfectly good landline. But she prefers to use her cell phone because she can go anywhere with it. And that's in far contrast if you ask like 10, 15 years ago, when it was the reverse. We got that cell phone, but the minutes were limited. So you know what? She was always on the house phone all that
Yep.
time.
Yeah. It doesn't cost me money. And then you had free long
Yeah.
distance, right?
Yeah.
So
And then now it's like unlimited calls on the phone. So now she's using the cell phone because of the convenience and everything. So for me, that's what I'm thinking about is just our behaviors and patterns of where we do our business and transactions. It's all on the cell phone these days. And, God knows what was, taken or taken.
yeah, and I think there's several like I've talked to several people about the hacks and it's like, well, it's just my name, my email address, and people already have that. And I've been hacked before, this and that. But I think there's more to it. There's your privacy has been compromised, right? And there's nothing you can do about it at this point because it's now on public websites. All your privacy, all your stuff. Like again, we don't even know the extent of the damage of
Well,
these hacks, right? We don't know. Um, but if you recall, like this is going to be an extreme case, but um, when the Ashley Madison hack happened, right? And we started figuring out who was on that site. Oh, things got interesting real fast, right?
oh, things were very spicy.
Yeah. So, you know, but again, like you you figure, roughly, I don't know what the last census was, but I think it's somewhere like 450 million, citizens in the United States, right? 225 million records have been taken, and we don't know necessarily who, like congressmen, congresswomen, politicians, business people. When some of this information starts coming out, like what was this person doing? What was, there are there's a lot of potential of disruption and impacts to the business world. Right now, let's think about the second and third order effects to the market, the stock market. Right, if we know that a CEO, again, going to use the Ashley Madison example because it's just an easy one to reference. Let's say there's information a CEO was maybe committing adultery, right? And now divorce papers are going to get filed. What's the impact of the stock price of that particular company now, right? Simply because of a hack. Now I'm not advocating that behavior is acceptable, in any way, one shape or the other, but it's just an example of there's impacts when this information gets out there and it's not controlled. There could be impacts to people's financial portfolios that we were not aware of. Things that came to light that we weren't aware of, which now will impact the market because of the way people view um, how a company or a business may actually be running. And another thing of this is like we safeguard medical information like HIPAA stuff, right, for a reason, because we say that that's private information between you and your doctor. We can't discriminate against that, right? But when that medical information is put out there to the for public consumption, whether through consent or not, it's still out there, right? And speculators, Wall Street will look at this information and say, okay, where am I going to hedge my bets? Let's just assume that one of the owners of a very prevalent AI company right now, it came down that they had cancer or something like that, and they were keeping it quiet. What is the impact of the stock price at that point, right? So when people think, oh, it's just a hack, it's just my phone number and email, it's not. There's bigger implications to the market itself. There's bigger implications to businesses. There's bigger implications to society in general when we downplay what we think is actually being taken, because there's, to your point, pattern of life. We had a CEO assassinated in late December, right? If I know where you're going and I have a bone to pick with you, fire insurance companies in California right now, not a lot of happy customers. But if I know where you're going to be and what your pattern of life is, if I have a bone to pick with you and I want to take matters in my own hand, I know where you're likely going to be. that's a problem, right? That's a big problem for a lot of people who are in positions of authority and power, and also, you know, like we mentioned I don't mean to laugh, but during the assassination, people were cheering for Luigi. They weren't mad that the CEO got shot. They were mad that Luigi got caught. And they were hailing him as a hero. So there's bigger security implications here on a cyber hack that can directly translate to physical security issues that can quickly get out of control.
I agree. And let's just say for the sake of records, all they got was phone records. But the thing is, now there's a direct correlation between your phone number and who was called.
Right.
Like that is worth something to somebody. And you can also infer, you think about it, your cell phone is also transmitting time. So
Right.
how long you've had that conversation. Is it a 30-second call or is it a 3-hour call? You
Right.
know, there's all that those kind of inferences, like what did you talk about for 3 hours? These stuff like this, like it may not be a huge dot or like crystal clear in terms of what you're sharing, but the implications are there, and that is still just as valuable and important because you can just put enough of these dots together, it paints still a picture.
Paints a very, very clear picture of what we call pattern of life, right?
Yeah,
From the targeting world, right? I mean, I did this for a living for the military. Which try to you want to find a bad guy, if you have to identify their pattern of life. Where do you likely think they're going to be, and that's where you're going to send the Rangers or the SF team or the SEAL team or the Raiders to go and be waiting to surprise that person, right? Hey, we need to have a little conversation, right? So the pattern of life information from the cell phone, I mean, I think people downplay that quite a bit. It doesn't click, but there's a lot of implications here. Having that information, even the metadata itself, right? Like just knowing when you pick the phone up and when you call, and this is goes back to the human conditioning of, okay, if I know this person's on the phone at this time, if I'm a scammer, that's when I'm calling, right? I'm more likely to get an answer, right? So there's just deeper things here that I don't think a lot of people consider when we do these when these type of events occur. So I'm hoping I'm hoping greatly that there is, still an emphasis on this type of preventative measures with the public-private partnership. Um, I think the border has taken a lot of the spotlight when it comes to the prevalent security issue facing the nation right now.
right.
And I understand why, but it I think to my point earlier about convergence, right? These worlds have collided, and we cannot take from one discipline and think that we are going to solve everything by putting it somewhere else, right? It's not going to work anymore. And you and I mean, the reason we're doing this podcast is we want to have a physical guy and a cyber guy on here talking about this. Is like we have to work together. we, we,
Agreed.
we cannot take from cyber and give to physical and think the problem solved. No, all we did was we reinforced physical and we exposed ourselves in the cyber realm and vice versa, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's that's some some excellent points, and considering in a more integrated world that we're becoming, we have to look at all sides, and we're not going to know it all. It's just not possible. The world is changing so quickly, we can't absorb all the information as good as well as we can.
Right.
Okay.
Like your physical security issue today could very well be your cybersecurity issue tomorrow, right? Somebody went in and robbed your house. They got your access token. They got your UB key. They got your laptop. Oh, that's
They
not
have,
good.
they have everything at that point.
Yeah, like that. That's quickly going to turn into a cyber security situation, right? And vice versa. Oh, I got access to their system. Great. I know everything. I know who to go after now, right? So
Yeah.
It's, we have to stop looking at security from a cyber realm or physical way. We got to look at it holistically of like, where does the where does this specific incident, where does it expose me in other places, right?
Yeah. So let's switch gears and what else do you have a quibble about for this week?
Well, we did touch on the border a little bit. I think I'd like to touch on a few of the implications of the executive order on mass deportations. I think there is a lot of confusion about what this means um, across the nation. I think so. I'll say this first. Um, was the border secure? Well, I'm not a border expert, so I can't I can't tell you one way or another, yes or no. However, over this last week, I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of people who've worked that problem: Border Patrol agents, DHS, Coast Guard. Um, so according to these guys that I spoke to, and they spoke to me off the record very candidly. They said, "Listen, we have the capability, yes, but we were not given the authorization from the previous administration. They took a different approach to addressing the immigration situation. Again, politics aside, good, bad, or indifferent, that is what it is. Now, currently, as of January 20th, the policy has taken about a complete 180, according to my guys, and a lot of funding is flowing down to different task forces, specifically law enforcement task forces. And for those of you who don't know, a task force is essentially a unit created to do a specific function that can involve local, state, and federal law enforcement officers. And in special cases, you can also bring in certain elements of the U.S. military to support. But that's not the norm. There's special authorizations that have to be in place for that, because we have posse comitatus here in the United States, which essentially means we don't use the military for law enforcement functions. And there's very limited exceptions to that rule. So I want to be clear about that. So the essentially the media has been saying there's going to be mass deportations. Anyone who has either overstayed their visa or who is here illegally, doesn't have authorization to be in the United States, is likely going to be deported and sent back to the country of origin. Or if the country of origin is currently in conflict, they'll go to a holding country pending further review of their case, right? So just kind of framing what has been said and what has been done. So here's kind of what I think we all have to look at collectively, right? And I'm not here to give an opinion on whether or not the deportations are good, bad, if I agree with them or disagree with them. That's not what I'm here for. Right? I think we need to look at what will be the impact to the market, to the security space, given that these events are going to occur. So we have to understand something, that the U.S. economy for decades has relied on migrant labor, both legal and illegal, for several decades. I mean, that's just, whether you agree or disagree, that's just a fact. That's just a fact that a lot of our labor, especially skilled trades, to include the H-1B visa program, is done by either legal or illegal migrants. It just is what it is, right? So we have to understand that there are individuals who commit crimes but also fulfill labor jobs when they're not committing crimes. And so what does this mean when we're actively going and detaining these people and deporting them, right? Well, we have to consider when we remove an amount of the labor force, that means demand is going to go up, right? It's the law of supply and demand, right? If I have 1,000 carpenters in my neighborhood today, there's 1,000 different carpenters that are competing with each other. So there's going to be a rate that reflects the market, right? If I take out 300 of the carpenters, now you know, I have a shortage of carpenters, right? So each carpenter can now charge a higher rate. And so my my point, I think my point that I'm trying to make here is, as we start removing people from the labor force, and there's arguments, well, these guys are just criminals. Well, I can tell you, having worked with law enforcement for several years, that a lot of people who have jobs are, they commit crimes as well. So just because they're a criminal doesn't necessarily mean they're not working a job or doing a trade as well. It's just the reality of the situation, right? And so my point is that we might expect to see certain services become more expensive, even though the goal was to kind of reduce inflation and drop prices. In the short term, if we're removing labor from the labor force and removing people's ability to get jobs done, we might see an increase in prices for labor. Furthermore, staffing is going to be harder, right? If we have less people to pull from now, we're going to have staffing issues. So it's some things to consider, which I don't think everyone has, is there will likely be impacts, with this operation. And have you planned for them? Have you thought about, okay, you know, for example, I'm in the data center space, right? We do a lot of data center construction. Well, I need people who can pour concrete and lay pipe and do reinforcing on the construction of a data center, right? Are my construction vendors going to have the people to actually do this? Are these projects going to get delayed? Are they going to get pushed back, right? If the data center gets pushed back on its construction, what does that mean to AI development, right? That's the next thing in the chain, right? Or capabilities in the cyber realm, right? What does that mean for now economic implications of, we can't deploy new products because we don't the baseline data center couldn't get built fast enough, right? So I think we really have to take an objective view of what will be the impacts of a mass deportation across the U.S. I think there were short-term political goals stated that a lot of people were supportive of. Again, I'm not here to judge them one way or the other, which current president is trying to deliver on. I understand that. I get that. That's just the game. However, I think we need to look at the long-term impacts here and consider, what does that mean for each one of our businesses? What does that mean for every technology sector, everybody in the technology sector, everybody in the construction sector, everybody in other sectors as well? Because a mass deportation could have massive implications.
Yeah, I was just thinking, not only just the supply and demand issue, but with all the recent wildfires and natural disasters, we need, you know, affordable labor. I'm not trying to
Right.
say slave labor or indentured servitude or anything like that. I'm just saying
Right.
affordable
Of
labor.
course not. Of course not.
Yeah. And affordable by means of just having proper supply and demand. So, to rebuild the homes that were on the East Coast, were impacted by the hurricanes last year, that's going to require a lot of manpower and labor to do things. Here on the West Coast, we had to rebuild the entire Pacific Palisades, parts of Pasadena, and parts of Altadena. We also have to rebuild those places too. And so some of these places were flattened completely, like destroyed. Go look on the internet and see, like, the fire just didn't discriminate, just went and swept through entire whole neighborhoods so much that it looks like a war zone. When it comes to constructing things, you're going to need manpower to build, these homes and businesses again. And if you don't have it, like, well, what now? Um,
And to that point too, like just skilled labor for raw material production, right? Like that in itself requires a lot of labor, right?
yeah,
So it's yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, to your point, we need a lot of labor right now.
yeah, especially what was it? the current president was before the World Economic Forum, say, come manufacture and build your jobs here and everything. Oh, you're gonna need people for that.
Well, I can tell you from just a labor projection standpoint, um, you know, there's been over the last 30 or 40 years, and again, I want to say this, I'm not advocating one career path over the other by any means. I think everyone should choose what makes them happy. However, there has been a big push over the last 30 or 40 years or so to go to college right out of high school. And again, like I said, there's nothing wrong with going to college. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but that has also limited a lot of people can get to get funding to go to a trade school, and because of that our skilled labor force has dwindled um, considerably, right? We don't have a lot of young people going into the skilled trades. However, the skilled trades right now pay significant amounts of money because there's not a lot of people who can do them.
Right.
And so I think, from a big strategic perspective, we have to consider and look at, like, if you're a company that has some education benefit, and I applaud all the companies that do that. um, you know, we need a lot more electricians, we need a lot more carpenters, we need a lot more masons, we need a lot more guys who can do cement work. We need the skilled labor in order to continue growing and building the baseline level infrastructure that we need to push things along. So it's one of those it's one of those things. It's like, how do we solve this problem? And for years, solving the problem meant hiring migrant labor, both legal and illegal, and we'll just keep doing that because it's cheaper and it's more sustainable. And we're not getting people coming out of trade schools at the rates we were back in the 50s and the 60s. So I think it's a shift that we need to have in mindset of, you know yes, we can all go to college, but somebody has to build, lay the bricks for the building, right? Somebody has to pour the concrete.
Yeah.
We haven't got to a point where we can automate that yet, and we won't if we can't build the data center to process the data to figure out how to do it, right? So if we want to get to that automation where we've automated skilled labor, we kind of need to get we need more skilled labor in the force so we can get there, right? So um I worry about that with this deportation thing. um
What do you think the risks are, actually?
well, I mean,
And I'm
so
only asking that is because, we're talking about, immigration here, which is typically not our normal subject and realm, and trying to make sure
true.
the average person's like, uh-oh, we just became a political podcast. And
Right.
no,
Well, no, I mean, which we're trying to avoid, right?
yeah.
But I think this is going to impact us. This is a big political issue that's going to impact security and all of us in a lot of different ways. I think if I would say the majority of my guards in the Bay Area when I was there running a data center, I'd say my mix of, like, American U.S. citizens to either H-1Bs or guys on a guest worker visa was probably about 40-60. So 60% of my guard force was some type of migrant of some flavor, right? Either one or the other program. All legal, but they weren't born in the U.S. and they were here on some type of visa, work visa, right? So okay, and this is 2017, right? This is 2017. This is one city in the U.S. and that's the fact of the matter was that's a lower skilled, lower wage job, and a lot of Americans just weren't interested in doing it, right? for whatever reason. Again, maybe they had other options, which good on them, right? But I was having to supplement the guard force, the security force, with a lot of migrant labor. Fine, not a big deal, right? But if you're a migrant here legally and you're seeing a mass deportation happening, are you going to feel safe staying? Or are you going to execute your exit clause and say, you know what, maybe I might just go back home until this thing dies down. And when this thing's over, I'll come back, right? So you have the forceful removal, right? You have the deportations that are going to happen that we know. And look, I'm not advocating for anyone who's committed a crime, especially a violent crime, to stay here if they're here illegally. Like I'm not advocating for that at all. Um, However, what's the fallout, right? What if skilled labor that's legally here that wants to be here all of a sudden feels that I don't like the environment, I don't like the rhetoric, I'm going to leave. So now we're not only losing the ones that we're saying shouldn't be here for their bad decisions, we're also losing ones who we want to stay, right? I think that's a big risk. Um, and I will say this: it depends on how this is executed as well. We've only been seeing this for the last 2 days, right? So um, we don't know how this is all going to play out, and I haven't seen a lot on the plan of execution. We've just seen a lot of buildup. So some of this is speculation, of course. But then I think the other risk is if people are going to make a flight, if there's a mass migration back south or to Canada, what are the implications there of roadways being packed or, now we have a bunch of empty houses, vacant apartments. What happens to the crime in that area, right? Little neighborhoods where a bunch of migrants were living are now vacant, right? Well, now we know that vacant neighborhoods just, the devil's
With
playpen.
property value and everything.
Yeah, there's that as well. Property value, businesses that have sprouted up around these neighborhoods, there's an impact there, right? So I think, you know, when we look at the numbers, the economics and other things, we kind of understand that the border has been mismanaged 100%. I'll say that, the even the H-1B program and the naturalization program, I think we can all agree that those have not been managed well at all. I mean, there's no reason that I had guys when I was working in Silicon Valley, been here 10 years working legally, no criminal record, and they were having issues getting naturalization. It just doesn't make to me, it doesn't make sense, right? Like that, like they're working in Silicon Valley on high level problems. Like I think we can agree they're not causing any problems. Let's get them their citizenship, right? Um, so 100%, I think this has been mismanaged, but I don't know if a massive flip of the switch is the right answer. The shot to the system, I think, is going to be it's going to be a jolt. It's not going to be like a zap. It's going to be a jolt. And you can make the argument that it's better to just get it over with early, right, and then let it recover, right, as we roll into Q3, Q4. The market will adjust, and the market does. The market will adjust. It will adapt, and we'll figure a way around it, right? But I think we have to look at some of these implications. Plus, let's remember Q1 2025. A lot of people were planning on opening up headcount and moving, and like hiring and putting people into positions, right?
Right.
So what does this do to that, right? Because we all had projections of Q1 2025, Q2 2025. We're gonna ramp back. We're gonna ramp staffing up, right? Like the market is recovering. It's getting stable. We can start bringing on more headcount to expand. $500 billion of investment into data center and AI production, right?
Yep.
Power allocation set out specifically to data centers so we can do more AI research and AI development. But again, if we don't have the baseline skilled labor to build a data center, what does all this mean, right?
Yeah, especially if you think about like, I think a lot of people fail to realize, but one of the biggest economic drivers of the U.S. not doesn't be defense, but one of the biggest drivers for budgets for education is overseas students,
Yeah,
and
right.
they trying to bring in so much money for universities and colleges uh, to
Because
spend in foreign
their tuition is almost three
double.
x to an
Yeah.
in-state student.
Yep. And so my point is like think about all that money that's just possibly potentially evaporate.
Right, right.
You get arrested for being here illegally, and they deport you in the middle of a semester. That does just not bode well.
No, I think I've heard that there is a plan, like there's a plan to do this, a scaled plan of violent offenders who multiple felonies. They're going after those guys first. Um, then it's to the next tier of people who've overstayed their visas, and then it's going to at that point it's anyone who's here illegally, right? And I will say this, like this was the policy, almost what was it, almost 8 years ago now, 2016, when Donald Trump was elected the first time. There was there it was I don't want to say it was a zero tolerance policy, but essentially it was like if you stayed an hour over your time, a warrant was issued for your arrest, and you were going to get a notification from ICE, and you were likely going to get sent down to a holding center. So we've done this before. We've done this before. This isn't a new thing per se, but I think what my concern again is the size and scale of what they're talking about. It converging with where we are as a nation when it comes to the need for skilled labor. Um, I don't know if we can have a positive outcome in both arenas if we execute this certain way, right? Like you can't take out. I don't know what the numbers are on illegal migrants right now, but I heard something in like 11 million. I could be wrong, but if you take out 11 million people all at once, right, that's going to be a major impact, economically, financially, and to the labor force specifically. Like you're taking a big chunk of the labor force out, and for that matter, a big chunk of the labor force that's doing a lot of the baseline jobs that need to get done, right? That most people aren't going to do. And what I don't think people understand is that like that means if we hire if you take them out and you want to hire American workers to do those jobs, it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a significantly higher cost. So, pool cleaning service or landscaping or just
Remain au pair.
yeah, all these things come at a significant cost now, right? Um, which I don't know if the market has fully realized that yet.
And then more money equals inflation at that point because you have more money on the
Correct.
market, which means
Correct.
prices go up, which means you're just heating the economy, which is
So
we're just spinning things out of control once again.
again, I don't know if people have thought past the immediate need of securing the border, right? And like don't get me wrong, yeah, I believe we need to have a secure border 100%. However, like I mentioned, we it's the outcome that we want, right? We want a secure border, we want a good economy, and we want to feel safe, right? Well, if we do one but screw up the other two, we didn't really solve the problem. We just made two other problems bigger than they need to be, right?
Yep.
So,
Bring
um,
gasoline,
so
bring gasoline and inflaming the situation.
yeah, exactly. So I'm I don't want to say this because I'm worried about what's going to happen next week if I say this, but um, I'm interested to see how this plays out. I'm hoping, and the good thing is I've talked to a lot of guys who work the border issue, and I hear their stories, and I definitely understand that there are some really bad people who need to be locked away and put away. And I'm not by any means advocating that they stay just so we have somebody who can run a construction crew. Like that's not what I'm saying at all. Please don't take that from this. But I think what the good news, I think, what I believe, hopefully to is going to transpire is that the guys that I know who've been working the border, and working in Coast Guard, like counter interdiction and counter drug. I mean, they've played the game long enough. They understand what works and what doesn't work, and they understand how to make this happen, and do it well. So what I'm hoping is they are enabled to do a very good job on this, and limit the impact. Because I think when I talk to them about it as well, is because I brought up a lot of these points about, well, what happens if we take out 2 million people from the labor force in California? What does that do to the prices of everything, especially when we're trying to rebuild from Los Angeles? And we typically see after disasters, there's price gouging, right? What is this going to do to our economy here? And they're like, well, yeah, no, we understand that. We understand the implications. And we're very well aware of what could happen. So we try our best to limit that impact. So I'm like, okay, well, great. At least you guys are thinking about it. You're not just going out there kicking doors in and taking people like, all right, let's go. So I think that's a good sign. So I'm hoping that the plan is well executed. There's limited impact to the labor market, whereas limited as impact as there can be. And at the end of the day, also I hope everyone just stays safe, right? And that we don't have any unnecessary loss of life, right?
Yeah. All right. We are definitely past top of the hour here.
Okay, all
So
right.
let's what's our conclusion? What's our wrap up for this week here?
All right. Safeguard your cyber.
Amen to
Don't
that.
neglect it. Don't neglect it. There are big
Yeah.
implications here.
Yeah. I'm gonna just end the podcast on my favorite saying so far for 2025. What could possibly go wrong?
You're just you're just ensuring that we have another crazy week. You know that, right?
Hey, it gives us more to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So another episode in the books here. We'll see you guys next week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Always happy to have a comment. If you have something that you want to share a story or quibble you might have that you want to add to the podcast, feel free to share. We're always happy to
Yeah.
listen and everything.
If you have a topic you want us to talk about, we're more than happy to try to talk about it.
Yeah. All right, folks. So we'll call it quits here today, and have a wonderful weekend. So I'm Joshy, and that's Al, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care.